Good afternoon. Welcome to everybody. I can see we've got people joining us still, so we'll just take a few seconds to let everyone in and then we'll kick off. Okay, right, okay, well, welcome to this afternoon's Urban Living Lite event. This session today is focused on build-to-rent and technology. For those of you who are not aware of it, Urban Living Lite is a series of 8 online sessions this week. And these are a precursor to the Urban Living Festival itself, which is a new event taking place at Tobacco Dock on July 7th and 8th. That might be great, a real live meeting people event. I can't wait myself. When we do get there, the festival is going to be based around 3 stages: live, work and stay. And it will focus on the increasing convergence between the numerous sectors in hospitality, in real estate, and the various asset classes involved. Today, it's all thanks to our sponsors, Yardi, and here's just a short video about them. Thank you. Just before we start, a few notes on housekeeping. They're all on the screen, but I'll just read them out to you again. Remember that everyone's on mute, so you can scream and shout at the screen at us as much as you like. We won't be able to hear you. If you do want to say anything, then please put it in the Q&A section or the chat section. We're going to be speaking for about 45 minutes, and at the end, there'll hopefully be 10 minutes to pick up on all the questions. If there is something really pertinent, really important that comes up during the chat, then I'll try and answer it at the time. I'll try and put it to the panelists. Do note that we're going to make a recording of this, and the recording will be made available to everybody, I think, tomorrow. So if you need to duck off, the event will be available to replay at your leisure. I think that's everything. Like I say, please do bring any comments on the chat, and we'd love to have lots of questions from you. These things always work much better when there's a interaction between you and us, and it isn't just me and my colleagues talking. But on to me and my colleagues. My name is Dave Butler. I'm the chair and the CEO of the UK Apartment Associations. It's a trade body for the build-to-rent sector. We're there to grow the sector and to grow our members' businesses. I've been very kindly, my colleagues actually have very kindly allowed me to promote our own event next week. Next Friday, we're running a sustainability summit, a one-day event, 15 sessions picking up on everything that's important to you in build-to-rent, everything in sustainability and build-to-rent, from ESG strategies through to how to get rid of waste. Also behind me, you'll see a promo for Land Aid. I'm sure most of you will know Land Aid, but next Thursday night there is a sleep out to help out. We're taking to the streets, or our back gardens anyway, to raise money to prevent young people being forced to be homeless. You've seen that there's a link in the chat box to our event in Unison. Anyway, enough about me, enough promo about this. I'd like to hand over to my panel now. I've got a really exciting panel, although one of them claims to be a Luddite, which is a little bit difficult in a technology session, but they've all got lots of really interesting things to say. And I'll let them introduce themselves briefly, tell you who they are and who they work for in particular areas of interest. So, as ever, if I can perhaps start on the top left of my screen, Sibel, with you.
Thank you. My name's Sibel Osman, and I head up the PRS and Build to Rent division for Rendall and Rittner, the asset management company.
Okay, and Martin?
Thank you, Dave. My name is Martin Zdravkov. I'm the head of residential and impact investments at LaSalle Investment Management.
Okay, and Joe?
My name is Jo Vandebergh. I'm a real estate investor, investor in property tech companies, and CEO of Bringme.
And finally, but by no means least, Justin, who works for our sponsors, Yardi.
Hi, everyone. Nice to see you. Justin Harley from Yardi, Regional Director of our residential and our flex-based business, which encompasses build to rent and student accommodation. So nice to be here.
Okay, thank you all. And I hope everyone feels it's a really interesting panel covering lots of sectors, covering lots of disciplines, but all with them with focus on technology. And today's session is all about technology. But I wanted to perhaps subvert the question, let's talk about how technology is powering build to rent, to go and ask why we're thinking about technology. What is it that we need technology to do? What is the problem we're trying to solve with technology? And Martin, if I can hand over to you to set the scene. I think you gave some very interesting observations about coming into the sector when we talked yesterday.
Yeah, thank you, Dave. So to my mind, technology is not the end, it's a means to an end. And it's really what technology should be helping us achieve. It should be here to help us derive better investment decisions. And again, I'm kind of sitting in my ivory investment tower and saying, well, it's all about the investment decision. But ultimately, technology in the build to rent space should be, well, from my perspective, should be used to do that, to do just that, to help us get a better investment decision. The technology in itself, to my mind, is not, as I said, it's not necessarily the end. It's a means to an end. It's a way of being able to answer the question, so what? Intuitively, we know that most people in our two-bed flats across the UK are two people sharing. So what? How does that help us does it help us drive rents higher? Do we actually solve the equation in terms of the investment and asset management for occupancy, or do we actually hold out for residential yields and rents? The operational real estate sector tends to be kind of starved of data, or effectively, or not necessarily starved of data, but kind of like data comes in many different shapes and forms. And I think it's just being able to derive a coherent set of data points that can help answer these questions is really what we are interested in from technology standpoint.
Okay, Martin, I'll pass over to you, Sibel, from an operations perspective. How far does the technology you've got provide you with the data you need to manage your business effectively?
It's a good question. I don't know that we do have overall, I think perhaps, and maybe Martin might agree, across the sector, enough, I suppose, infrastructure in place to be able to capture the data that we actually need in the volume in which we need it for it to make a substantial difference. But within Rendall and Rittner, we've made every effort to try and capture as much data, to be able to sort of put it in a pool of data and draw on it. Simply, but you know, I don't know that we necessarily, as an industry, have sort of nailed it in terms of capturing data.
Yeah.
Perhaps Martin might agree.
Absolutely, Sibel, I'm completely with you. I mean, one of the things that, again, from an investment perspective, is kind of very interesting is I just had a conversation earlier today with some of my colleagues about rents in a North London scheme in excess of £2,500 for a two-bedroom flat. Fantastic. What does that tell me? Absolutely nothing. Because does it mean that the scheme of 200 units is fully occupied? No, it doesn't tell me that. So rental level in itself is not that. But then equally, knowing the occupancy, I'm sure you can feel a scheme in a far-flung location at rents at £10 a month. So it's it's that kind of like getting the right level of intricacies of the data, and then from the data, then going to the next step, which is the so what. You know that the North London scheme is charging £2,500 a month for a 2-bedroom flat. Does that mean that you can drive the rental growth from there? Or does it mean that effectively you've achieved a premium rent at this point of time, and you probably have to come down in order to maintain occupancy on the next letting? So the data points are scattered. I think Sibel would agree with me, and I'm sure Justin will challenge us on that. And I'm hopeful that he's going to be able to tell us that there is a solution, and Joe as well. But the data points are scattered, and I think we are still at the infancy of the data gathering process. And I think there are probably a few steps for us to get through before we can kind of achieve the nirvana where the investment decisions and the asset management decisions, I'm sure Sibel will agree with me on that one, are driven by data rather than this is how it's been done for the past 30 years.
Joe, can I throw that over to you? Because you opened up describing yourself as both a property investor and a real estate investor, and also you're in the technology space. Do you see that dilemma of investing based on gut feeling versus capturing data? And if so, what are Bringme doing to help capture that data?
Oh, from my experience is that data already starts from day one. If we look at our clients' I give you a very concrete example. One of our solutions as a digital concierge is a simple, smart parcel locker solution. There is, with the pandemic, there is a huge demand for such solutions. So the first thing that we ask to investors and property managers is asking from, okay, what is the size of the installation that you think you need? The first answer we get is, one compartment for each 3 or 2 apartments. That's a classical demand out of the market. The first thing we do is that we say, okay, give me your compilation of your building, 1, 2, 3 bedrooms, where it is situated, and we run that through our data center. And what comes out is 9 on 10, an installation which is much smaller than the building managers expects. So he's not in need for that such a huge installation. Based on the data and the region where the building is located, the installation is on average 20% less larger than what he has in his mind. In other words, his investment is 20% lower than what he has already in mind. And it's just based on the data. What is strange is that sometimes we really have to put the data on the table and walk him through the data to convince him, because he's in his perception, he's so convinced that there's a need for 1 or 2 parcel compartments for each 3, 4 dwellings. So yeah, data is somewhere, it begins already from the start in your conversation with your customer, and it drives the decision, that's for sure.
Absolutely. But are you able to get the data to Martin, to the ultimate investors, to help them make the decisions, or does it get lost somewhere in the middle?
The thing is, we need to explain, because you have data and you have data. Reliable data is extremely important. More important, the data must be understandable by your building manager or your investors, and it needs to be limited to the relevant KPIs in order to support the building manager and the investor to take the right decisions. And that's our job. We need to make the insight of the data clear, crystal clear and understandable. And yes, we succeed in that. Once we are up and running with our installations, we have dashboards for the building managers and the investors, so that they can see the evolution of the real use of the installation. So they can be used in different levels. But it's up to us to make it understandable and trustworthy.
So we've got a number of key parts of it. We've got the investors demanding information. We've got the operators needing information, needing data. We've got data providers like yourself wanting to do it. Justin, what stops or what makes a successful implementation of of this environment. Where do you start looking for success and failure? And you need to start off by unmuting yourself. First step in success.
Thank you. Dave, it starts at the very beginning, really, is that for me, there's a lot of talk of technology, it's what we do, a lot of talk about data. Really, it has to start at board level. And the whole strategy around what data do we need, where and who is the data for, is got to be driven by the board. And that kind of filters down. So often we kind of get seduced by bits of technology, I feel, and so some of it gets put in tactically and it works for a bit, but actually not a lot of thought is given to the end goal of the data. And therefore, you know, the biggest obstacle to getting, as Joe says, accurate data, which I think, Joe, you're absolutely right, because it is all about decisions, is actually having lots of different systems. So you've got lots of different components, and that makes the job of compiling the data much, much harder. And so often, you know, no offense to Sibel there, the asset manager may go off and do one thing, marketing will go off and do another. Sales said, oh, we're not using that, we're going to do this. But actually, and I think a lot of businesses, and we see this in build to rent actually a lot, especially in their inception, you know, when they're first starting out, when the funding has arrived, the development's starting, you know, lots of different bits are bolted on. And to have that holistic strategy about data, which is long-term, it's a tough thing to do, but it will save you a fortune in the long run.
Okay, I can see Joe nodding his head, and you talked very lucidly about the need for KPIs and particular KPIs rather than lots of data. Do you think the industry as a whole, as the built-in sector as a whole, has got a view on what those key KPIs are? And I'll be keen to hear what you say, and then perhaps I'll thrust it back to Martin to answer whether we can address that question of so what. So Joe, do you think we know what the KPIs are for our industry?
I think that data is a big bulk of a spaghetti, which is very, and I like to eat spaghetti, but the thing is, if you want to serve the spaghetti and make it crystal clear, that's a huge challenge. So that means that the first thing you need to start at is to define the KPIs as all the different stakeholders and levels, because all the interested, as Justin told you before, all the interested stakeholders are completely different and their approach is completely different. So the challenge in the spaghetti is to define the KPIs for the right stakeholder. That's the start. And then it's not because the KPI is clear for you, that the KPI is clear for your partner on the other side of the table. So you have to discuss what you really mean and understand about that KPI and if it is meaningful or not. And the challenge is that most of the stakeholders, they consider every KPI as important. And so they want to keep all the database and all the Excel and everything around it. And if they have to present their showcase to the board or to their colleague, they do not understand anything anymore. And so they talk in a miscellaneous way. So the challenge is, let's do what we have told us at school. Let's keep it crystal clear, synthesize the most important KPIs and discuss around those. And if you do not define them, you will end your discussion in a spaghetti. And that can be sometimes useful, but most of the time it's, I prefer other things.
I think we'll come back to Justin as potentially the chef, the spaghetti maker in a bit. Sibel,
we're all doomed.
Yeah, you're all doomed. Sibel, do you think that you have the KPIs clear for you, the ones that you need, and which ones therefore you can then say to your technology providers, this is the information I need? Or is there still some work to go in terms of the sector getting more mature?
I do agree. I think that there's I do think that there's still some work to be done here. I don't know that, like I said at the start, I don't know that we've nailed it. We haven't. You know, this is an ever evolving discussion and area, and this industry is ever evolving. Do we ever really know at any one time at this point? No. So I agree with Joe there. You know, I think that we're not there yet.
So Martin, how are we able to answer the so what question yet?
I think, well, I want to be controversial and I want to disagree with somebody, but I cannot at this point of time. And I'm sorry. I completely agree with what Sibel and Joe were saying. I don't think that we are ready to answer the so what question just yet, because I think the data that we have helps us answer some of the questions. But as Joe rightfully pointed out, it usually, like, people are kind of people are kind of reluctant to rely solely on data, because the operational real estate historically has been from an investment perspective, has been largely driven by what I would describe it as a bit of a gut reaction. It's kind of like, we have done it like this, what can possibly go wrong if we do it again the same way? And unfortunately, in a world where data is available, and I'm hoping that Justin and Joe will tell me that data can be made available in the ways that actually we need it, that Sibel and I would actually consume it. People tend to kind of throw this ball of spaghetti, as Joe very eloquently described, at you, and rather than enjoying a meal, you end up having a messy shirt. And you're kind of trying to unravel the spaghetti from your shirt, and at the same time trying to enjoy the meal. But it's like, at the end, it's just a mess. So I think we're probably very close to getting the KPIs that we need. And then there is the next step, which is the so what, which is what Joe so eloquently described. It's kind of like, okay, you have defined your KPIs. So how does those help you drive the investment decision making? And I completely agree with what Justin was saying, that like, it has to be like data gathering and data analysis can never be seen as a cost center. The moment when you look at it as a cost center is the moment when you've lost the war with data. You have to look at it as a business enabler and how it helps you drive your business forward. Because without it, you will still be doing that gut reaction. And I personally don't believe that's the way forward.
So Justin, perhaps can I turn to you now? And well, I'll repeat my bit as the spaghetti mixer or the cook, the chef, because it seems to me that you are particularly in the center of all of this stuff. You're managing the heart of it. So what are you doing about it? How are you going to solve the problems of the world? And how are you going to make Martin lots of money, Sibel's life easy, and give Joe lots of business?
Well, actually, there's a couple of things. One, I think there are a lot of KPIs that exist already. And I think they are being used by both investors and property managers alike. And I think that much of what we're asked to do is to help property managers provide the metrics to investors. So we do see a lot of stats, and of course that goes without saying. There's obviously standard stuff in terms of profit and loss, income statements, balance sheets, etc., debtor reports, cash flows. That all goes with it. I think some of the really interesting areas, though, because this is a relatively new sector, are, if I was an investor, I'd want to know what lease-up rates are going to look like, and what is the cost of acquisition of, what's it going to cost me to fill the building? I think starting from there, if you look at the journey or the renter's journey, knowing the different stages of that and having those stats are key. So obviously we have vacancy and occupancy, but the lease up rate's really critical. It's really interesting when we implement software, everyone rushes because the building's empty, so they're all about lease up. But actually, no one spends any time thinking about renewals. And yet fundamentally, this is a long-term asset hold. And renewal rates, renewal ratios are absolutely key. Because ultimately, if I was an investor, hey, if my renewal rates are better than the next person's, then that's got to be a good thing, because cost of acquisition, we all know, is expensive. So I think there are lots of stats, and I think it's about combining the, I suppose, financial management stats with the operational stats are really, really key, and being able to see both of those. So I don't know whether that really helps you, Dave, but I do think that a hell of a lot. And I also think operators kind of know what they want. They may not know how to go and get them. Do you know what I mean? They might not know how to go and get them today.
I think, and I shouldn't, I need to be careful in terms of what I might say about my members who are operators. But I think I'd go back to Sibel's point that often we manage on the basis of gut feeling. We have document, we have data, but we use it to support the gut feeling rather than to challenge the gut feeling. And that's it. But I'm interested in where you think we can learn from. I mean, Yardi have got lots of experience in the US, and Joe, and I think you've got stuff in Europe as well, in German, from a European perspective. And Martin, you've got cross-European experience. Where are we going to get the next steps, the clear information on what KPIs? Is it within this sector in different countries, or is it in different sectors in the UK? Where should we look to?
Is that
if you want to talk about Yardi matrix and stuff, that would be great.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think, you know, sharing with you, Yardi in the US has a service called Yardi Matrix. That is a service that allows anonymized data from many different developments and multifamily buildings in the US. And that data is then aggregated and looks at some key KPIs in terms of not just your building performance, your operational performance, your investment performance, but also how does that benchmark against other people in your space, other people in your region, and stuff like that. And I think ultimately for the industry, that's a utopia where we would like to go here in the UK, because I think that really gives investors a real snapshot on how buildings are performing. But it also, you know, operationally, it helps you and guides you where you need to tweak and improve and, you know, get better as a business. So I see that's utopia, but I suspect that may be a while off at this point.
What you said, the word utopia, what makes it utopian? What is not possible to achieve? I mean, we've got a question from Sebastian Moritz, thank you, Seb, who says, what in the panel's view prevents organisations from sharing KPI metrics and data anonymously in comparison to the hotel sector? And why is it such a struggle when every player is in need of a benchmark set of data? Martin, do you want to pick up on that one?
Yeah, no, absolutely. Seb, thank you. I think that's an excellent question, and I would very much welcome like a industry standard set of data, and effectively a sharing of data across the industry in terms of build to rent in the UK and international. I think the challenge really is that the build to rent sector is still very nascent in the UK. And what I mean by build to rent, I mean purpose built, purpose designed, purpose managed build to rent. Now, if you say that, for example, you have a build to rent scheme in Watford, and you provide data for that scheme, it's not difficult to deduce which one is the owner of that scheme. And I think that's really what kind of prevents the data from coming together. At the same time, if you have 3 hotels or 4 hotels, 5 hotels in Watford, that's really where it becomes more difficult to say, well, which one is which, if you end up getting into that granularity of data. So at the same time, if you look at the amount of build to rent in the UK residential for rent, it's 1 to 2%, what's estimated by many of the property consultancy companies. So the question is, how do we get the build to rent as part of the wider residential for rent? And what I mean by that is mainly buy-to-let landlords data, which they are disincentivized to share because there is nothing in it for them. So I would very much welcome like the SDR reports in the hotel sector. Yeah, I would very much welcome kind of sharing of data anonymously, obviously. And I think the challenge is on us as investors to really realize that sharing the data in an anonymized way is actually going to be more beneficial to all of us in the medium to longer run.
There, Mark.
We lost Dave.
Oh.
Oh, we've lost the operator.
Sharing data. Sorry, did I just freeze then?
You froze, Dave. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Probably my frustrations at struggling to get data shared, which I share with Martin. As you know, we've been trying for a while to get things going within the UK, and we'll carry on trying because it is vital. Sibel, how do you feel as an operator about sharing data about your operations with your competitors?
Oh, I think much like any other operator, I suppose. I mean, I agree with Martin. If it's anonymized data, you know, and it goes into sort of a greater pool, and it is anonymized, then I don't see why that would be a problem, because equally they would be adding their data into that same pool. I mean, I think if this is going to work, and you know, we're going to use data for the greater good, everyone needs to be invested in kind of producing and putting data into the pool. Everyone needs to be on board with doing that. Otherwise, you're only ever capturing a small proportion of a really big picture. So in simple answer is yes, if it's anonymized.
Great. Well, no, I'll come and sign you up. I think,
Dave, that's a challenge for you then.
Oh, it is a challenge that my members know about. We're spending a lot of time working with the BTR trying to capture both total returns indices and operational indexes, and what good looks like in terms of gross to net costs. There's a lot of effort that's going into it, and a lot of frustration, because as Sibel says, everybody can see the point of it, but in many cases it's the response we get is, yes, I'll put my data in when I can see everybody else is putting their data in. And, you know, it's I'll put this in, but show me what you've got already, which is extraordinarily frustrating. Perhaps moving on from data now, we can talk about perhaps maybe focus on some of the technology issues that maybe our viewers are wanting to hear. But of course, if you've got any questions, whether about data or tech, then do put them on the Q&A. Sibel, I wonder, perhaps I'd like to turn to you and just ask how you see the role of technology in your business. What benefits do you see, and what are the barriers you see, and where are the areas you're looking for improvements from?
I mean, I think technology, from my perspective, and I'll now sort of move away from the sort of back end of stuff and maybe move to the front line, if you like, for a little bit. But I think for everyone, it's really sort of about making life easier, perhaps at a push of a button. And by doing that, if, for example, I can talk about maybe sort of my sites and having site staff, you know, really the focus for me is, you know, implementing technology, for example, that would free my staff, for example, the site staff, to focus more on customer service, not be sort of terribly bogged down with lots of admin and you know, hours and hours of parcel packing. You know, a great example of that is I have actually Bringme boxes on one of my sites, and that saves you know, my site staff absolutely hours of just sort of zapping and you know, doing all of this stuff, and you know, they've got more time to speak and engage with the residents, with the tenants, to sort of do more, you know, to walk around the site and to be more productive. So anything really for me that sort of is promotes efficiency, makes life easier, is really where it's at for me. And that could be anything, as I said, from Joe's Bringme boxes all the way to, you know, bearing COVID in mind at the moment, sort of having booking systems that make life easier. And that is for gym facilities and residence lounges, for example, you know, to be able to have apps and technology that would at a push of a button enable a resident to simply book a time slot in, rather than having to sort of find a member of site staff and, you know, book a time slot in. All of this sort of is the kind of technology, in short, that that I'm interested in.
Great. And Joe, perhaps given that Sibel's a customer of yours, the Bringme boxes, that is all about efficiency, I think. How do you use your technology to improve the customer experience as well? Because if there's anything built to rent, it's about selling a customer experience and selling a consistent customer experience.
Maybe let me answer in two parts. The first one is that what about technology and how important it is? From my point of view, technology needs, one of the main missions of technology is to serve the people. That's a huge challenge at this moment. If I look at the market, at this actual moment, we see that residents are in need for simplicity, user-friendliness, and the particular challenge is to enable that. They are now often confronted with island applications, island systems that are working all differently. They're not intuitive, they're not user-friendly. And I compare it, we have a lot of initiatives at this moment that gather all kind of apps on one platform, and it's up to the user to sign in on all those downloads, sign in on all those different apps, then understand those things, and they end like the remote control of your television. They only use 1 or 2 functionalities, and the rest, they never have a clue during a lifetime period of 10 years what it's all about. And that is what is happening also now from in our business, in the real estate business. We are all inventing island systems which are not integrated, not user-friendly, and who are not serving. Yes, they have a lot of functionalities. You can dim your lights with it. You can accelerate your ventilation. That is not a problem. The thing is, how do I do that? And that's what I'm really missing at this moment. So for me, the future of technology is that we are making a small misunderstanding. It's not about developing apps and smart applications. The smart applications needs to be in the background. A good application, a good smart technology is in the background and you do not see it. It just appears when you need it. And so in future, you will see, and the residents are in demand for that, they don't want devices. They even don't want a smartphone. I don't think that in a few years' time, people will still have smartphones and tablets because they are not in need anymore for that, because it's too complicated. What they are in need for is they just want to command. They just want to ask something and they want to have an answer. They want assistance all over the place. And so the residents, they just want to talk by walking through their apartment. And that's what we have to facilitate. That's what we have to offer them. They ask something, they get a request, and it's done for them. They don't have to look at their smartphone, going to Google and searching after keywords. That's old school. What they need is just ask at their convenience what they need at that moment, and they want a response. And more than that, they even don't want to need anything. They just want that it's happening. It needs to happen around them. The system needs to know the resident. He has one single sign-in, and that's the sign-in of your apartment, which you're renting to him. It's one sign-in, and from the moment he's signed in, he has all the convenience at his disposal, which is much better than in a hotel. And so at that moment, he's served all the time, from morning to evening. And the system knows it so well that he doesn't need to ask all those questions, and that it's all done in the background and not upfront. So that is the first step. And that philosophy is how we try to build our products. So if we look at the Bringme box, everybody thinks that it is a smart locker system. But on the end of the day, our concept is completely reinvented compared with other systems in the market. We have a computer with doors. That's something different than a smart locker, which we have components to open the doors. No, we have a computer with doors. So the possibilities are plenty. And that computer with doors, he has to serve the resident, the building manager, the investor, etc. And that's another philosophy, because we are very customer-centric in our vision and the way we develop all our products during the past years.
Okay, Joe, that's a very powerful vision. I buy very strongly into that sense of everything working together. What I struggle with a little bit is the same problem we have with data, is getting people to work together. And is it a question of standards, or is it a question that we need somebody in the middle, whether it's an Apple or a Google, to say this is the way it's all going to be done and you plug into my systems?
That's a very good question, because at this moment we see that all those island systems, they work on their own, they're not integrated, and that does not support the user friendliness and the usability of the products. So the challenge now is that everybody comes to the building area and we deliver our plugin to a kind of general layer, and that is then the assistant layer who makes the translation and who is talking, who is enabling the conversation between the resident on the one hand and the technical complicated installations that nobody wants to know what it's all about. But that translation is made by a smart layer. It's not a consolidation of all kind of apps. No, it is a smart layer, which we a kind of API layer, in which we all plug in with our IoT systems. And for the end user, he doesn't have a clue. He just knows, and he's asking. And the more services he has, the more he can ask. That's clear. And so the general layer, that's what we now have to define. But that will be a very challenge to enable that. And yes, for example, we try to integrate as much as possible and to influence all the smart appliances which are in our reach. But okay, everybody has its limits there. So at some point, we still have to integrate with another system. And therefore, we need that smart layer, which is the assistant, and which talks that all together.
That's fantastic. Perhaps I can throw the challenge to you, Justin. I mean, Yardi has huge amounts of data sitting in the clouds. Do you see yourself having a role in that integration layer, that smart API layer that Joe talked about, or are you another person to plug into that?
I think ultimately we do, yes, because I think the breadth of the Yardi suite across build to rent and other sectors in real estate means that many of the components that you need are there. It's fascinating to hear Sibel talk about apps to book. That today. You can get that today. Integrations with smart assistants, it exists today. So these kind of things exist today. I think the challenge is that kind of apps. You use the Apple example. Is that App Store? They have an App Store scenario. In the US, Yardi has an integrations platform, and we integrate with lots of different technologies. The market is still new here, and there are, like for example, if you take referencing, that's one we cross every time. Referencing is an area where there are so many providers that it's almost impossible to try and integrate with them all. And until there's some consolidation, where you're going to integrate, then I think that's what we're waiting for. And I think because the market is still new, I think we're a little way off doing that. I think that, and that's our position is absolutely, because there is a core infrastructure there which will do most of what you need to do. And then that integration journey, and as Joe said, there are limits, right? There are so many things out there. There are so many different components. Where do you start? And we do that. This year we've done different payment providers because we're trying to automate direct debit. That was the priority, which, helping people collect the rents faster, quicker, easier, making it easy for residents to, set up their direct debit, automating that process. And I think that that ultimately will grow and grow and grow, and it will just get bigger. And ultimately, by default, I predict that it will be a bit like an app store of things that you can just plug in. It's whether you choose to have Yardi in the middle or you choose to have something else in the middle, I think.
Okay, Sibel, what does that sound like as a future world for you?
Perfect. Utopia. Perfect.
Yeah,
You've
well,
done
send
it.
the contract.
You've done it. So I think that's it, isn't it? I mean, I think that when I'm sort of thinking about sourcing services, as it were, it's always more attractive to be able to go to one source and have all of these sort of functions at your disposal. I think it becomes a little bit more sort of all over the place when you have to go to, as quite rightly as Joe and Justin mentioned, when you have to go to multiple sources and get something here and something there, these island functions, as it were, and hope by the grace of God that they would just talk to each other. You're able to make them plug in, or this will work in line with this, or do I need to get something else that sits in the middle of this and this to make this work? And this is just an age-old issue, if you like, and dilemma. So that is a perfect world.
Yeah, it is. And actually, Dave, Sibel just reminded me of something. Very often when we implement the technology, we end up displacing. I mean, yesterday there was someone came with us 54 different systems. 54.
Gosh,
that's extreme, right? That's
I mean, I've only got 53.
But very often when you start to add them up, it will be in the 20s and 30s. And so ultimately the first challenge is to try and do that, and then start to be able to plug on the ones that are critical. And so I do believe we're heading that way, and I think the world is heading that way. It will take some time. It will take a couple of years. It takes time, because the world of prop tech is moving so fast. There's so much said about it, and Joe, you're so right. There's so many different apps and systems that are cropping up. There's probably a new one today that we don't know about. The challenge is, and they'll probably do a deal with a provider and they'll get a special price to get in the market, and suddenly that provider's saying, oh, you need to integrate with this. Well, in reality, that's a backward strategy. You need to have that strategy about what are you trying to do first of all, and then select your technologies once you have got that strategy. So it's got to be the business driving it, not a department with the business saying, I really need this. It's got to be an overall strategy, and that links back to the data. It really does. It just links back to the data.
Well, so, at that point, can I throw it back to Martin and say, Martin, do you care about your the organizations you invest in, their IT strategy, their tech strategy, their ability to be coherent about it, or do you only care about the outputs from it?
As long as as long as they provide me with the KPIs and with the insights, it's not that I don't care per se how they do it, because I do, but what I care about is significantly more of the final product. And as far as I'm concerned, they have the freedom to choose what the right product is. I'm not saying that their choices are always, well, effectively, like they have the freedom to make their own choice, but there is often a right choice. Let's put it this way.
There's a consequence for a wrong choice.
Absolutely, and the consequence for a wrong choice is you cannot provide me with the KPIs, you cannot provide me with the insights. On the back of that, I'm sorry, but you're not enabling me to make better decisions. So I'll have to find another provider that's actually enabling me to make a better decision.
No, I think that's absolutely crucial, that it is all about, as you say, making the right decisions. So we've got 10 minutes left. There is an opportunity for any questions, but at the minute I can't see anybody has put any through. I hope that isn't a reflection on my chairmanship or the quality of the conversation, which I think has been very stimulating. Perhaps we could then just turn to a couple of things. Just what's the word? What do we see, just simply, what do we see around the corner? What's the next thing, the next big initiative that we start to see, Joe and Justin, in terms of things that are coming to market? I mean, we've talked about the tech stacks and the strategies, but what are practically the next areas that you see as being right for
Take that, Joe, first. Do you want to go first, Joe?
I think I explained it already a little bit, that what the next steps are. The challenge will be now, there will be a step between. Okay, I explained to you what we are really in need for and how easy and user-friendly all those smartness should be, and still not is. So at this moment, the challenge will be how can we make the right choices with all those island information systems and all those island solutions that we have today. Choices based on the data, yes, but on the end of the day, the dependency is also a challenge. What we see is that we have a lot of new suppliers in the market, we have a lot of new solutions in the market, and if we take 2 or 3 decisions before we know it, we depend on those suppliers without having a clue and impact on them, because it's a kind of black box, Trojan horse, which we are entering into our buildings. And that's something which I am, as a real estate investor, I'm a little bit coming and I'm really a technology fan, so do not misunderstand me. But what I see is that I've made some mistakes in the past, that I was too technology minded. I made decisions, we had a huge impact on our operations, which had a huge impact on our investments. And it was because I'm a real technology believer, and I believed and I saw also the return on investment of our technology investments. But on the end of the day, what I did not saw was the dependency that I had on such a level that I was not anymore in control. And that's a really nasty thing, because from the moment you're out of control and you depend on the goodwill of your suppliers, who are maybe new in the business and are not on them from their point of view, not in control, then you can end up with strange and dangerous situations, which from my point of view, I would like to avoid. So the balance between those entering those new technologies and keeping the good of the existence, that's for me something which lessons learned, which I will be very careful that I don't walk fast. And it's strange to hear that maybe for somebody who is really evangelizing technologies, but it's something which I'm, from my point of view, I'm a little bit afraid of, and which I had some bad experiences.
Justin, did you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, I did, and actually, you know, I think Joe mentioned this, and I think it's really important. Is in technology we hear a lot of buzzwords all the time, and I think, you know, we hear prop tech being a bit of a buzzword. The latest ones are all about artificial intelligence, machine learning. What does that mean? In reality, they are kind of terms that I think they kind of get investors excited and prop tech investors excited. What they really mean is that there is technology available now to automate software and teach it to give responses. And I think very simplistically. And in terms of where we invest millions of dollars right now is in this area. And to give you an example, things like expand, and COVID has just accelerated this, but I suspect it's a trend that was already happening. COVID has just accelerated. It's the ability for systems to actually make decisions and provide information for you. And what I mean by that is the chat on your website. If someone books a tour, it can do that with somebody. You know, it will actually walk them through. It will ask them, do they want to see a virtual tour of the building, or do they want to see a floor plan? It will make that decision. It will do it for them, and it will guide them on the journey. So the processes that you would do manually, that's a very easy thing to automate. We talked about, and I love what Joe said about the assistants. Absolutely right. That's exactly right. In Alexa and Google Assistant are big parts. Every home, I can't remember what the penetration is of Google Assistant and and Alexa is in the home, but it's very, very high. I mean, I scream at my one all the time, but actually it's improving. It's improving. But actually, why can't you ask your Alexa or your Amazon anything about the business? Hey, Alexa, how much do I need to pay on my rent next month? Can you pay that for me? That is where we're going, and that is where we're at. It's here today. It's here. It exists. It's just people building the applications on it. And I think us as, and I'll talk about us as operators, not as a software company, understanding that that is available. But the other thing is, it's not one technology. People want to communicate in multiple ways, whether it be a text on a mobile phone, whether it be through Alexa, whether it be an email, or whether it be a telephone call. And I don't think that's going to change, not for a long time. People will want multiple ways to communicate. Your job as an operator is to provide the service that they can communicate in all the ways.
We've got 3 minutes left. I've got a couple of questions in front of me. I'll just ask one, and nobody has to answer if they don't want. Are you seeing, we're asked by Prab, Joe as well, are you seeing any blockchain solutions to speeding up the planning approval processes, or more generally as a more efficient coordination platform between stakeholders? Let's take that as a general question about blockchain, and perhaps picking up on the discussion Joe and Justin have had about making things easier and working APIs. Do you see a role for it in prop tech in the near future? I don't know if anyone wants to pick that up. Nobody wants.
Let me. Yeah, I mean, I was gonna say, like, I have to confess, I know very little about blockchain, so I apologize. But like, it just generally on prop tech, I would love to see the planning process being disturbed by a prop tech solution, whatever that prop tech solution is, maybe whether it's blockchain based. Like, I would love to see the planning process being disturbed.
Okay. Thank you. That's great. And does anyone want to make a comment on blockchain or?
No, and I think that's the point, Dave. And I think Martin said it very eloquently. It's about just improving the process. It really doesn't matter what the technology is underneath it. If it's blockchain that does it, happy days.
Okay. Well, I think at that point, Sibel, I really ought to give you a chance to finish, because you're the poor person stuck in the middle of using all this technology.
Yeah.
Based on our discussions, are you optimistic or pessimistic, or want to put your?
No, I am optimistic. I think, ultimately, perhaps where we sit today, does technology affect someone moving, or affect, business in terms of, occupancy? Probably not. But if it's done right and we go in the right direction, it would. At the minute, having all of this technology in place, and I am very optimistic because it's been extremely interesting. It definitely affects the speed in which you rent something, the speed in which you can achieve 99%, 100% occupancy versus a block that doesn't have any technology. So yes, I am optimistic, and I'm looking forward to it. No pressure, Justin and Joe.
Okay. I think that's great. And I think that's a good point to finish on. I'll just say thank you to Sibel, thank you to Justin, thank you to Joe, thank you to Martin for some really great insights. I'll finish on a couple of questions. There's one saying, given that hotel rates are publicly available, why is BTR sector so concerned regarding confidentiality? Well, we are. It's an issue of maturity, and we will get there. It took the hotel sector a long time to develop RevPAR, and we'll do that as well. And I'll finally sign off and allow you to go to the slides, which my apologies, and remind you that the rest of the schedule is up there. You can still sign up for all these events, and we move on to the next slide. Then, if anybody has got some money to spend and wants to spend it on sponsorship, then that'll be great. They'll get great value from it, I'm sure. So thank you for attending. Please do the chat. Please come back and see more. And if you want to find more about sustainability, do come and visit me next Friday at www.ukaa.org.uk. So again, thank you, Sibel. Thank you, Martin. Thank you, Joe. And thank you, Justin, for putting up with me and for giving us a fantastic, really interesting conversation. Thank you. Cheerio.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for the invitation.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody.
Thank you.